Well, welcome back to another episode of the Weekday Saints podcast, where we look to highlight faithful work happening all over our city that we can often miss, and the people that do that work. In today's episode with Terran Anderson, we're really excited for you to hear her story, because one of the things we realize is that sometimes the faithful work we're called to do, we go into it kicking and screaming. And Terran's really vulnerable with her story about how she thought she was going in one direction and God just kept pulling her in another, where she's now able to serve so many people through her work at the United Way. She talks about loving others, caring for the work she's called to do, and being a light in the places God's called her to be. So I hope you enjoy today's episode. Well, welcome back to another episode of the Weekday Saints podcast. We are so excited that you're joining back in. As always, I'm here with LaQuisha Ewing, and we are really pumped to have our guest today, Terran Anderson. Thank you for making time to be with us today.
Than's for having me.
Yeah, we're
glad
pumped
to be
have
here.
You. Well, before we jump in, tell us a little bit about yourself. Are you from Chattanooga? How'd you get here if not?
Yeah.
Do you have a family? Tell us about who Terran is.
Oh, gosh. How much time do we have? So I'm not from Chattanooga originally. I'm from Augusta, Georgia, which if you look at city sizes stacked up across the United States, Augusta is just about the exact same size as Chattanooga. I came to the area to go to Lee University, and around the time that I was getting ready to graduate, it was Mayor Corker at the time. His assistant had come and laid out this plan at Channel 3 News, where I was interning, and it said, this is what the riverfront's going to look like. And Augusta is very similar to Chattanooga in that it's a community divided by a river on the edge of two states. And I remember thinking in that moment, like, there's nothing like this happening in Augusta. And I just was really starting to get into the festivals and the excitement and what was going on, and had found a church community. And that was kind of the linchpin moment for me of being like, I think Chattanooga's home. And then around that same time, he was my boyfriend at the time, had gone to Chicago, and we said, we'll go to Chicago or we'll go to Chattanooga, wherever you get a job first. And shockingly, he got a job in Chattanooga first. And so we've never really looked back. I think we're lifers now. For work now, I work at United Way. I'm the vice president of community and corporate engagement and marketing. And I've got two kids, one who's 12 and one who's 13. So I'm here.
Teen mom.
Teen mom.
Yeah.
That's right. They're lovely, actually.
Yeah, they are.
It's not been too terrible
Sweet
so far.
kids.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, tell me why, what did you study in school? How did you end up doing kind of what you're doing now for work?
Oh, this seems to be a recurring theme for me. I had a totally different idea of what it was I was going to be doing. I had a telecommunications and a theater double major. And do y'all remember when like theater ministry was like real prevalent in the 90s and early 2000s? And so for a long time, that was it. I was going to be in ministry, and I was going to bring theater ministry to a church. And I did one internship for a summer. And at the end of the summer, I said, you know what, I better just attend church rather than trying to work there. Because it made it really challenging. So I totally appreciate people who are in full-time ministry and can do that. It was really hard for me to see how the sausage was being made some days. So that kind of went by the wayside. And then again, I was at Channel 3 doing an internship, and I was like, I'm going to do news. And I remember a gentleman pulling me aside and said, well, when you start in news, when that like tractor trailer turns over on 75 at 3 a.m., you go. You're the low man, like you go.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I don't want to do that either. And then ironically, I had graduated. There were no jobs. It was 2007. We were getting into this sort of economic time that was challenging. And I had a friend who was working at a local ministry who said, hey, my visa is expiring. I'm going to have to go back to my home country. I know you can do this. Come do this. And so I ended up at Precept Ministries for a little over a year. Y'all, this is so wild to say in 2024, copying videotapes. Because that's what you used to do. You would make a copy of a videotape. That job probably doesn't exist anymore. They're probably like dragging and dropping a file. So I did that for a while, and then ended up doing community relations at the airport for a little bit. It's funny to think about now. I already was seeing God's providence. I didn't realize it, but I would find a position and move, and about 2 weeks later, we were all used to this in 2008, 2009, they would have mass layoffs wherever I had been just before. And so I really kind of got I want to say super lucky, but it was really the blessing of the Lord to like leave a place, and then they would hire people, and it's like I would have been on the chopping block for that. Found my way just sort of personally to a group called Young Professionals Association of Chattanooga, and started like playing around with their events. and realized like, this is really fun. Had my kids, Lillian and Jack, decided I wanted to stay home for a minute. Had a nonprofit friend who said, hey, do you know anybody who could work 10 hours a week? And I said, yes, I just got to get out of my house for like a minute. And that was sort of my foray into nonprofits. I didn't have any professional training in nonprofits. I just had volunteered. I knew what I liked to do. I knew I had a background in marketing and community relations. And so what originally was just this like little 10-hour-a-week job with the Craniofacial Foundation of America, great group, turned into an 8.5-year-long career with a national nonprofit. And then I left that job in 2022 saying, no more nonprofits. I'm done. Never again.
And here you are.
And here I am, somehow at the United Way of Greater Chattanooga.
As a VP.
As a vice president. Yeah.
Yes, I think oftentimes the way that we see the Lord working in the yeses in our life. Mm-hmm. And what I just heard in your story is sometimes the Lord is working by closing some doors and the no's.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And I think this is true for a lot of people, regardless of your industry, but I think also specifically in the nonprofit world, 2020 rolled around and we were told to figure out how to do it better. Oh, by the way, you've been doing this in person. Now you're going to do it virtually. A lot of people had opinions in 2020 about how we should be doing our work. And it was just taxing. And a lot of our nonprofits ended up losing a lot of people, either because they chose to leave and found a different industry, or they just had cuts that had to be made. And so for me, I got into 2022 and I was just tired. I just didn't want to do it anymore. I was tired of feeling like, I was tired of doing this work that sometimes felt very, very thankless, but then also at the same time was just a huge lift for me and my family. And you think about nonprofits, one of the main ways we raise money is events, right? Yeah. So that means it's not just a 9-to-5. It's my volunteer deciding to text me at 11 o'clock at night, running an event late. It was all of those things that I had just finally gotten to this place of like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. Ironically, I had applied for lots of other jobs that felt like they had been served up to me on a silver platter, that I was overqualified for, should have gotten, had all the right people on the inside, right? Like, that's kind of what I love about Chattanooga. That's one reason I stayed, is like, you can call anybody. Like, I'd be like, I can call my friend LaQuisha because she's going to know somebody who's going to know somebody, and I'm in, baby. Like, that's the Chattanooga way, right? And I had done that 3 separate times at the end of 2021, and kind of like slowly but surely watched all of those doors close in my face, one after another. And it really was hard. Yeah. It was hard.
So during those times though, like what was the emotion in relationship to your faith? What was the emotion that was like the most prevalent for you?
Like, we're just getting deep. Just a little bit of a feeling of abandonment, right? Like, God, you've made all these promises. Where are you in this? Like, you've set me up. You've given me all these skills. I remember, it's so funny. I remember standing in the balcony at church and literally looking down at the worship team and just being like, I'm like doing everything I can. And then feeling like, oh wait, like it's actually not about what I can do. Which is what led me to the moment of being, I walked in one night and told my husband, like, I think I may have just quit my job. Like, it was a very stressful day. It all came to a head. And I was like, I think I just quit my job. And he was like, that's okay. We had been having the conversation of like, okay, if I were to step away, what then? And I just kind of finally came to this place of sort of frustration, but also frustration with like what was happening, frustration with feeling like these doors were closing, frustration with my, feeling how I was feeling about my own self-worth of like, wait a minute, like, you're coming to me for these jobs. These aren't even jobs that I'm going after. Like, you asked me to come and do this thing, and then now you're telling me no. Like, it's so weird. And so I said, I think I'm done. And he goes, it's okay, be done. And we kind of, both mentally said, all right, you know what we're going to do? We're going to have the summer, and I'm going to stay home with the kids, and we're just going to go to the pool. And I'm going to kind of network. And then maybe by the time they go back to school, I'll have figured something out. That was like kind of my mental plan. That's what I had told myself. That's not at all what happened. But that was what I had told myself to kind of feel good about it. But yeah, I'd gotten to this point that it was like, okay, Lord, I'm stepping out. I'm doing this thing. Like, are you going to take care of me? Are you on the other side of this door that I'm about to open?
Mm-hmm. We think that our spiritual life is this separate thing from these things that are happening daily. Mm-hmm. And, one of the reasons we're doing this podcast is we're saying that you can't do that.
No,
like
no.
like the things that you're describing, like the reason there's an emotion there with it is because what you believe about who God is and what's happening in your life, that's where the rubber kind of meets the road.
Right,
Like,
exactly.
what is it actually? We throw around these phrases like, I have my identity in Christ. But what does it actually look like
Correct.
when I can't find a job or something else in life isn't going the way it should? One, it's revealing where we are putting our identities.
Yeah.
But it's reorienting us to go, no, this is part of what it means to follow Jesus.
That's right.
Having a job is what it means to follow Jesus, or looking for a job even in that process. Yeah.
Exactly. And I just know so many friends who have really, it's hard to hear no over and over and not take it personally and not let it affect your understanding of who you are, understanding of who you're called to be in Christ. I've watched friends walk through it. And so it's been so cool to be able to share with other people of like, hey, look at this situation that I went through where it was all perfect. It should have, according to the world standards, all worked out just fine. What's really interesting, this is kind of like a God moment. I have, for every single one of those 3 jobs that I felt like I'm a shoo-in, this is an absolute thing, I have since worked with those groups, and in all of them, there's been some sort of moment or stirring in my heart where I'm like, this was not for me. Like, if I had somehow found my way or elbowed my way in or figured this out, I think I would have been pretty unhappy. And so it's always kind of nice when God goes back and shows you like, hey, look back, like I really did provide. I really did take care of you. There was reason for that. Yeah. Even though by the world standards, it should have been done. It was a done deal.
So oftentimes when you're looking back, is when you start seeing God's faithfulness.
Absolutely.
So you're saying that.
Yeah.
So talk to us, how did you end up after that hard season of months and months of not sure what's going to happen, land back in the place you didn't want to necessarily be, which was another nonprofit. Tell us about that journey.
Well, I said my husband and I this was March of that year. We had said that, by the time the kids went back to school, I would figure something out, or that's when we would start getting worried, right? Financially, is like, okay, if it's been 6 months, we'll start to kind of worry. I sent a few texts that afternoon and said, hey, I think I may have just stepped away from my position. And the number of texts and people weren't texting back. They were picking up the phone and calling me immediately and being like, I never thought you would have left. Like, I thought you were there for life. And so that was very interesting to me for like what people perceive or what people think, that they had no idea that I was ready to go, that I just felt like it was the next season, because it wasn't a bad employer. They weren't bad people. It was a great team. I just knew in my spirit it was the right time to leave. And the number of people who were like, I have this opportunity for you. I have this opportunity for you. I have this opportunity. So it was like, God didn't make me hang on too terribly long to be like, I'll see you in August and like just sweat it out over the summer. It really was like a immediate like, oh no, there is provision and it's coming. So really cool. I didn't have to rear back with that ex, right? With my child on the altar. It was like, I had just said like, okay, we're going to go up there. And God was like, here you go. Here are all the lambs.
You have the sweating sacrifice.
Yeah, that's
this is what I call them. Like sometimes God puts us in those sacrificial moments.
That's right.
And you have to sweat it out.
That's right.
For a long period of time.
Yeah.
So to that end, like I've worked in nonprofit in some regards at various levels, and there are definitely very fulfilling moments. There are
absolutely.
I would arguably say that I've probably had more fulfilling moments than not working in that sector of work. Let's talk a little bit about the challenges, and how God shows up for you in those challenging moments during the work.
Yeah.
Is there a story that comes to mind?
No, but I do definitely, I confidently feel like regardless of whether or not you are a believer in the nonprofit space, you're the hands and feet of Jesus. It's kind of funny. Like I think about, God using the ass, right? Like speaking through the ass. And I remember that a lot of times when we're doing work of like, okay, I know you don't profess to know Jesus or know any of these other things, but like what you just did was totally Jesus. Yeah. Those are the moments for me. Or like, in our work, we take hundreds of calls every day of people who are living their worst moment. I'm not on those calls. We have some really talented people who do that. But hearing those stories back from them of like, I was at the end of my rope, or I didn't really know where else to turn. And knowing that we were providing something, not me personally, but our staff was providing something that gave hope in that moment, like that's everything for me. That's why I can do it all day long and go ask for the big things that people are most likely going to say no to, but that's okay. I'll go ask somebody else. And it does fill me back up and keeps me going and motivates me to do what is often still thankless and not necessarily recognized work, because I do know like it's the Lord's work at the end of the day.
Right, and that's actually that's the antithesis. I can't say it that fast of being a Christian, right? For God to get the glory.
That's
so,
right.
like, if it may be thankless on our end,
That's right.
like our individual selves, but is God being lifted up? Is who God is on this side, right, of heaven, being seen in this moment through whatever I've said or whatever I've done or whatever I've been able to do for other people.
Yep.
Yeah, and you're right. I love how you brought that in, that it doesn't only mean Christians are doing work that can be glorifying to God. The theological term I love is the common graces that show up in our life, that where God is moving and working, that it actually isn't the Christian's job. It's God is doing the work.
Yeah.
He's using all of us to hold this earth together. And I think nonprofits play a big role in that. The cool part, though, of your job, though, I think, is that in the work you guys do kind of on the front lines of some of the biggest needs in our city, is you're inviting corporate sponsorships into that frontline work. And where it's not saying your work and their work's, one's important, one's not. It's saying, no, we actually need each other to make this happen. And I think that's really cool.
I love the fact, so United Way says, and I've heard them say countless times, that as an org, you sit at the intersection of corporate and community.
Yeah.
And I think that's a godly place where two or more, right, gathering, right? You're sitting in the middle, you're this go-between. And sometimes people don't understand. Like, they don't understand those individual stories. They don't understand all the work it takes to actually fill the coffers, to be able to meet the needs, and, all those things. Talk to us a little bit about, like, how you've been able to be a blessing, maybe not for the people that are receiving the services, but the people within in your workspace.
Yeah. 2022 wasn't that long ago that I had sworn off nonprofits and said I was not going back. And I was ready to go take that, big cushy job on the hill and get paid lots of money to do very little stuff. And because my friends who had made that leap told me, they were like, Terran, you don't understand. The corporate folks are not working at the same pace that the nonprofit people are. And I was like, okay, I'm tired. I'm ready to go do that. Well, in reality, when I think why God sort of continued to keep me in this space, it isn't necessarily just for those people who are on the other end of that phone call or who have that need or whatever. I think that's all very important, and that's where I get the joy from. But for me, when I think about my specific task and what am I here for in this VP role, it is to make sure that the people who are directly up underneath me or my teammates, that they feel like they can keep coming back and keep doing this work. And that's extremely important to me. I think we're seeing a little bit of a movement in our community right now about recognizing that how we treat employees and that the benefits that we provide to people and the opportunities that we give them are important. But I also think about just the stewarding of the people in my team. Like, how am I making sure that they're making it home for dinner, that, they had a hard day and they have a child with a broken arm, like, yeah, girl, work from home today. Like, you don't have to be creating some of that space and grace so that they can do what they need to do. Because at the end of the day, like, I don't think they're going to lay on their deathbed and be like, I got a great year-end review at the United Way, but they will be like, man, I was able to be there for my family and do these incredible things and provide in a way that, like, blessed us and, like, do this work that really meant good stuff. So if I can help equip them to do that, I think that's really important.
There's just a lot to unpack there. That's like the heart issues that we have going into the workplace. And I do think there are people that go into the workplace without that kind of purpose and actually need to be reignited into purpose. But there are people, especially if you're working in a nonprofit sector, oftentimes you are doing it for the purpose and understanding to still put work in its proper place, where maybe for some people it's elevating it, and for others it's saying, no, let's put this isn't all be for everything. It's only part of what it means for me to honor and glorify God. So I love how you just said that. It's like, how do I lead my team in a way where these are passionate people that could easily burn out, can put it in its proper place so that the other things in their life can fill their cup up.
Absolutely. I think if you asked many nonprofit leaders about sort of 2020, I think a lot of them would point to burnout and feeling stretched and all of those things, or losing people for whatever reason. And so that's not that long ago. Like, we all remember it. And so how do we build that back up to where people want to stay in this industry? Because a lot of people talk about Chattanooga having more nonprofits than anywhere else in the nation. Right. I don't know if that's true or not. Like, people love to throw stuff like that around about Chattanooga. It might be. But what happens when all those nonprofits go away? Right. If we all just get tired and say, never mind, y'all, we're going to go on and do something else. Or again, like, I'm going to go take that big cushy job and get 3 emails a day versus 3,000 or whatever that looks like. And for my corporate friends, I feel like I have to say, I know that's not really true. But, if they leave for greener pastures, thinking that life's going to be easier, or there'll be more respect, or there'll be better benefits, or whatever it is, like, if we lose all those people, y'all, then that work stops. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of our nonprofit leaders can point to a time in recent history that it did, of like, shoot, I had 3 program people leave, so this program doesn't happen anymore. Right. And that could have been the feeding of somebody. It could have been putting shoes on somebody's feet. It could have been some very real stuff that was a lifesaver for people in those moments. And so I don't want us to continue to lose really good people who love the work, who do it well, because maybe it's just a little bit easier over here. Like, I want to make it as easy as I possibly can on this side of the fence for you.
The work in nonprofit, there's all these amazing stories that keep us going. Yeah. But what I've had to tell folks is that most of the time, those are the big stories, are the small moments. Yeah. The daily grind of a nonprofit can be really hard. Yeah. As a person of faith and as someone who tries to honor the Lord in everything that you do, can you talk about ways you've seen the Lord show up in those things that aren't the big flashy stories, but in the parts of your job that maybe people would go, that's just the part she has to put up with, but it's ways you've seen God show up in those spaces?
I talked about it doesn't matter what your faith background is for you to be able to still be the hands and feet of Jesus. But, there are very real, tangible stories that come in all the time. It almost... We are not a faith-based organization at the United Way. We are there who are people who just want to do good. We come from all different types of backgrounds, all different types of faiths. But it is kind of interesting when somebody's kind of a believer and you have this cool story that comes in and you almost have that sort of like wink moment of like, this was really cool, right? I have a couple of people in my office that are like that we know that we share similar faith. And that's always kind of fun to do together, or talk about how the Lord showed up, or to be able to tell them that we're praying for each other, on a personal note. And so that for me, I think we can be Jesus to everybody every day. It doesn't have to be this great big thing. It doesn't have to be consistent or this, super miraculous thing. Like, I think we can just all show up and be Jesus as best we can every day for everybody.
That's good.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting way to look at nonprofit. Most people don't look at nonprofit leaders or staff as people thinking like that. They think they're just checking a box. They're just doing a task. But like, I'm hearing the heart. I know so many people, present company included, that they love Jesus. They're unapologetic about loving Jesus, but they're respectful. Yeah. And what I love about those people is that they love people first. Yeah. And so I think as Christians, like, that's one of the things that we have to continually remember, is that, I have to be a lover of people. They may not have my faith pathology. They may not, we may not even be on the same theological, wavelength as Christians, but I see another human. And if I can see that human being, right, as a intentional creation of God. That was something we talked about with another guest, like looking at every single face that you encounter every day and knowing that person is so important to God, whether they know it or not, and I'm going to treat them as such. So what motivates you?
Like, are you sure? Even the salty person that sent you the mean email?
Even the salty person.
That said, per my previous email, that person too?
Yeah,
okay.
The passive-aggressive salty person.
That one.
Even that one.
That's right.
So what does motivate you? Because you do get those salty emails.
You do.
You get people that hang up the phone in your face. You get people who, try to tear down your character because they see nonprofit as one thing. So what motivates you to show up every day?
It's funny. I was thinking earlier today about, that we're called to love. Like, the greatest of these is love, period, the end. Not like love and then also fix, or like love and then also do, this other like list of things. Like, and the greatest of these is love. Like, that's what we were called to do. And I think that's an expression of that, right? Like the salty person who sent you the email, the ability in your own, like, walk with the Lord to say, I'm not going to respond to this right now. Like, I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to come back to this, right? I'm going to come back to this when I have a little bit more love versus like what I really want to say. And I think that in itself is a witness inside the workplace, that it's like, I didn't meet you in that place. Like, you were salty, you were a little rude, but like, I'm not going to meet you in that place. In fact, I'm going to meet you with love, and then watch as their tone changes. And I think that's sometimes the greatest witness that we have, like, that it doesn't have to be, here's the track, right? Like, that tells you the 3 ways that you're going to get to heaven or whatever, or, with the hell's flames on the front or any of that. I think sometimes the greatest witness is somebody expecting you to react in a certain way and you react in the opposite. Like, yes. I think that's our role in the workplace, is to go like, or when you do react and you send the salty email back to the other salty email, then going back and asking for forgiveness, which is hard to do, right? Because especially when you start talking about the power dynamics inside the workplace, oh, my title's VP, or oh, my title is this, or to be able to stop and have a moment where you can own it. That's one of our values at United Way. Those, in my opinion, are some of the most like Jesus adjacent moments I can think of, is when somebody who maybe ranks higher than you can say, ooh, I messed up here. Will you forgive me? Like, I think that's huge. So yeah, just showing up and doing what we're called to do, which is love. We weren't called to do a million other things.
I'm going to change kind of direction a little bit, but I'd love for you to talk about being a mom and a VP at United Way, and how do you value those 2 roles, these 2 big vocations in your life, and how do you manage that and be present in both those places with excellence?
Well, I'm a big product of the 1990s Spice Girl, girl power movement, definitely. So even when I stepped away from work for a moment, I knew my desire was to return. For that season in my life, I knew that for that roughly 2 years that's what I wanted to do. But I always knew I was coming back. I just didn't know what that looked like. And for me, when I think about oh gosh, I don't know if I can get through this one with a straight face. When I think about my daughter and what she's achieving, I don't even want to say like is going to achieve, is achieving. I think some of that is because of the example that I've been able to set for her, that you can speak up for people. You can be a loving voice while also being a serious voice or a direct voice, that sometimes things aren't going to change on their own, and you got to get in there and stir some stuff up, right? And I love that. So when I think about my role in the community and then also my role as a mom, like, I don't really see them as 2 different things.
That's good.
They're finally getting to the point now that it's like, I think I can start trusting them to come with me on some of these pieces, which I love. I think about my friend Dion, who is at Tennessee Valley Federal Credit Union. And when she moved to the community and had her son and would take her son along with her on stuff. And now he's doing big stuff, and he's going off to college, I think this week. And people remark on like, I remember your son being with you. Like, you can bring them into this place. And I think that also helps us ensure that we have the next generation of people who are ready to step in and truly be leaders. It sounds so cheesy. Leaders for Christ. That sounds like something we all did in 3rd grade. But truly be leaders for people who are committed to loving the Lord and loving people and doing it in the workplace. I think a lot of times we get fed lies that there are only certain ways to serve the Lord, and that it doesn't happen at Unum or Blue Cross Blue Shield or these other places. It does. It happens at our nonprofits. It happens at our community organizations. Like, it happens everywhere.
It happens honestly. Wherever we are.
That's right. I think we can take the Lord with us wherever we go. So yeah, as I think about my kids, like, I think it's important for me to show up for them as a mom and do those things. You know, we talked earlier about making sure that we were taking care of our employees. It's not just important for me. That's not just a privilege that I have. That's a privilege that's extended to every single person on our staff. And maybe it is kids for them. Maybe it's a parent. Maybe it's a neighbor. It could be anybody who works with us that we give that same grace to, of like, if you're not happy and whole at home, it's really hard for you to come and show up to work and feel happy and whole. We see that all day long. Like, you might only get 35 hours of work in this week, but quite honestly, you may have worked harder than everybody else and faster than everybody else, because it creates some real loyalty when you can say, I know you have a soccer game, get out of here. You know, it's important.
I think we oftentimes take the verse where it talks about us being the temple of God.
Yeah.
And I remember growing up, we shrink it down to, well, that means I don't smoke cigarettes, or I don't do this. We keep it clean.
Plain simple.
But the big profound thing is what you just described, is that God, if we are the temple of God, that means that God dwells with us. And so wherever we go, we have the chance to be his ambassadors.
Yeah, absolutely.
In those places. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So we're bouncing around your faith. I'd love to hear, is there a verse, is there a story in scripture that it kind of is something that drives you or encourages you in the work you get to do?
You know, I think a lot about, I think it's in Hebrews where it says we have hope as an anchor for the soul. And I remember being younger, and that felt like the weirdest wording to me, hope as an anchor for the soul. And, you know, if you look at it in lots of different versions of the Bible, it kind of says the same thing. Like do you ever like read the Bible and then you go, I have an NIV/message, and like occasionally you're like, I don't know what they mean. So I'm going to like skip over the message for a second and see what he says. And then I'm going to get back over here and then I'll keep reading the NIV. It really doesn't matter what version you read it in. That's what it says. We have hope as an anchor for the soul. And honestly, it's been the last 5 years that I've really gotten, what does this mean? Because I would say prior to that, I didn't really feel the sort of like wistful all over the place. Like that wasn't really me in college. I'm an Enneagram 8. I know who I am. I know what I want. I know what you should probably be doing too. But I didn't feel this sort of like all over and fluidity and all of those things. Quite honestly, one of the first times I felt that was when people just kept shutting the door in my face and saying, no, no, no. And he was an anchor for my soul in that moment, because, again, I just think about us as like boats, just sloshing all around, trying to figure out where we're going. And he's going to hold true to his promise. He's going to hold true to that thing. And, that's one of those verses that it's like, I don't know what you mean, but
I get it.
More recently in life, I've been like, oh, that's what that means. And in 10 years, it may mean something else completely to me. But, yeah, that one's an important one to me.
That's good.
Well, listen, because I'm sitting here.
You got feelings?
I do have feelings.
Good.
I have lots of feelings. I have feelings of respect. I have feelings of admiration. I have feelings of thanksgiving, to know that we have someone in our community with a godly heart for what they do, who's a mom, a super mom is what I like to call women, that are working full time, big jobs.
Yeah.
But didn't see it as the biggest job, right? Mm-hmm. Pleasing God is the biggest job, and being a mom and being a model for your daughter and your son, and for other women and girls in our community. I want to say thank you. So you get this on record. I really do. I have total admiration. I do for not only you, but for those who do the work in this community, that goes unnoticed. It takes a lot from us spiritually, to pour into lives that we may never, ever see ever again. Right. But we love God that much that we can love people that much. And so I'm glad that your soul is anchored in Jesus.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I have a lot of respect for you guys kind of shining the light on what it means to be true to your faith, but also in the workplace, right? Like, I think we kind of go through seasons, right? I'll say this is the Western church, like where we are today, like in the United States, like where it's not cool to like be the Christian, right? And I think we kind of get scared too, right? We think about all the policies and procedures and what you can and can't say in the workplace and all those other things. And it kind of scares us off from like what we can say and what we can do and all of those other things. And I think quite honestly, if we listen to the Holy Spirit, sometimes it's not like I didn't bring you a brand new Bible and lay it on your desk,
Right.
but I don't know. Although now that I've said that, that will probably be the next thing that God tells me I need to do for somebody. But it can be in the simple things. It can be in the very small ways that we love people. And I think we'd be a lot happier as a Big C church and community and all of those things if we just remembered that's it. He just asked us to love.
Yeah. And, I think one of the things that we're highlighting too in this podcast is what it actually means to be the body of Christ. Mm-hmm. That, the Lord has obviously called you to work in nonprofits, for this season at least. Mm-hmm. Like, this is where you're supposed to be. When you get lots of no's and an amazing yes, and then you light up when you talk about, like, this is where God, he's called you to be here. And it's not poo-pooing on a corporate job.
Yeah.
Like, that is a place where
Correct.
the Lord's showing up too. And he's called other people that we're going to have on this podcast that's where they're supposed to be, or starting your own business. And so for you're playing the role God has for you, for the body of Christ to be his hands and feet in the city.
Right.
That we need each other. You're not just raising money, but you have people who care about our city, working in corporations that get a chance and have a way to do that because of the work you do, that you're showing them ways they can be involved. So thank you for all the ways you are being a part of the body of Christ in the work you do, not just in what you do on Sunday at your church, but in the work you actually do. So thank you. Thanks for making time for this conversation. This has been really wonderful.
Who knows where the wallet of Christ is for our nonprofit friends? Anybody know? I need them next. That's what I'm looking for now. Fundraising?
So the only hint that I have is that the wealth of the wicked is stored up for the righteous. So, you might want to go find them. I don't know who they are, but they got something for you.
We love our corporate friends because they are
Yes,
very
we do.
generous.
And with that, thanks for tuning in. We'll have somebody with us again next week. Thanks so much.